As the reigning F1 world champions, Red Bull faces a multitude of critical problems in order to maintain their position at the top of the standings. From the competition's intense pressure to their own internal team dynamics, Red Bull must navigate through a complex web of challenges to hold on to their title. So buckle up and join us as we explore the critical problems Red Bull must overcome to keep their F1 title. Now, Aston Martin may have been dubbed the Green Red Bull by their Formula 1 rivals, but underneath the bodywork their car is very different. When we had a nice look at the flaws of the RB19 and the AMR23 at the Australian Grand Prix, many noticed a significant difference that distinguishes both cars. Looking at them from the top revealed one fact concerning the gearbox housing. The upper side of the floor serves as a cover for some important mechanical elements, such as the gearbox housing. A direct comparison of the RB19's gearbox housing to that of the Aston Martin AMR23 reveals that the Red Bull gearbox is nearly half the size of the Aston Martin. It's worth noting that the Aston Martin shares components with Mercedes, including the gearbox and rear suspension, so the rear volumes of the W14 and the AMR23 are nearly identical. Returning to the RB19's gearbox section, it's also striking how the housing on the bottom of the car is lower than that of the AMR23. This would imply that the lower section of the RB19 gearbox has been designed to interfere with the diffuser channels as little as possible, with the depth allowing Red Bull to increase the width. Thus, it seems Adrian Newey and Pierre Wache designed the single-seater's tight packaging without sacrificing aerodynamics. The priority for them was to generate the greatest amount of vertical load from the floor, ensuring the best performance in fast corners. However, as recent changes have demonstrated, that tight design comes at a cost. In Saudi Arabia, both Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez had their gearboxes replaced, albeit as a precaution. Verstappen is frequently heard complaining about his gearbox in both practice and the race, which appeared to have less fluidity when downshifting. These are feelings that don't seem to lead to any subsequent problems, but it appears that the minimal sizing of the internal gearbox elements and O-rings can lead to increased stress and wear. This could cause problems later in the season. While rival teams haven't presented a credible challenge to Red Bull, the race in Saudi Arabia did expose a potential weakness in their car. Both drivers were told to slow down due to mechanical issues, which could leave them vulnerable when pushing the limits of these parts later in the season, when and if rivals have closed the gap. Only then would it be possible to understand whether the car was conceived at the limit of reliability or not. Red Bull's own Sergio Perez, for one, fears reliability issues will hit Red Bull at some point in the 2023 Formula 1 season, and he warned Red Bull to keep on top of the matter. Well, reliability is where it is. We saw it with Aston Martin through Lance Stroll's retirement, Perez explained to media. It's going to hit us at some point, but obviously we need to keep working on that. We need to have an issue-free races whenever we can. We were in a lucky position in Bahrain, but otherwise if we had to push to the end, we probably wouldn't make the end of the race, so there are a lot of reliability concerns at the moment, but hopefully they don't hit us anytime soon. Verstappen also stated that the team simply needs to do better and have a cleaner weekend after experiencing vibrations in the latter stages of the race in Jeddah that he linked to the drive shaft. However, with Red Bull holding a 1 second per lap pace advantage over the other front-running teams in both races, the focus has already shifted to the intra-team battle for the championship. And if the fight for the 2023 drivers' title is to be fought between Red Bull drivers, as early indications suggest, it will be very different from one fought between drivers from rival teams. Realistically, it will most likely be simple. Sergio Perez is a good Grand Prix driver, but not on the same level as Max Verstappen. Few are, given that Verstappen is already on his way to becoming an all-time great, and Perez's Saudi Arabian Grand Prix victory, however well executed, was made possible by Verstappen's drive shaft failure in Q2. But suppose Perez is able to find a way to make a fight of it. He'll have to take advantage of the fact that being in a close title race, one in which the other teams aren't quick enough to intervene, gives him some leeway. When it comes to intra-team title fights, Ayrton Senna versus Alain Prost at McLaren in 1988 and 1989 is the obvious case study. But perhaps the best parallel for the current situation is at Mercedes from 2014 to 16, albeit with a second driver who was a greater threat than Perez has proven in recent years. Lewis Hamilton was the better Mercedes driver in all 3 years, but teammate Nico Rosberg was close enough to take the title down to the wire twice, winning in 2016. They had their flashpoints, most notably the infamous collisions in Belgium in 2014 and Spain and Austria the following year. In the 2016 championship finale in Abu Dhabi, Hamilton purposely backed up the field in the hope of Rosberg dropping down from second place. None of these incidents were in the best interest of the team, but rather reflect two drivers who were confident in their own position and tried every trick in the book to gain an advantage. Red Bull is no stranger to such brawls. Mark Webber and Sebastian Vettel both had incidents, particularly in 2010 and 2012, when Webber was at his best. This resulted in collisions and team order squabbles, which could have easily cost a championship or two given the looming presence of Fernando Alonso's Ferrari. We never got to see how Vettel and Webber as an all-red Red Bull title fight may have played out, because McLaren and Ferrari were also in the mix when Webber came closest to the crown in 2010 and 2012. But the tension surrounding Red Bull's management of the closing stages of the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix echoed this era, with Verstappen clearly wanting to win and Perez suspicious of his teammate, particularly when it came to the fastest lap point. The scenes in Jeddah demonstrated exactly what Red Bull hoped to avoid after providing both of their drivers with cars that are, frankly, unbeatable at this point. Of course, the chances are that there will only be a few flashpoints this year, as Verstappen will be ahead more often than not. Nonetheless, if a race presents itself in which Perez can mount a challenge, Verstappen's uncompromising style will almost certainly lead to a clash, and Red Bull's competitors have already decided what they'll do if that happens. As Fernando Alonso stated, he hopes to be the first to profit when the Red Bull drivers crash. Of course, I hope I can take the 33rd GP win that's been talked about so much, but we have to be realistic. We know that Red Bull Racing are too far away at the moment, but anything can happen, like a problem with the stance or a crash between the two drivers. There's been a lot of talk about things getting heated between them. We'll look out for that. Red Bull also has longer term concerns, such as the impending impact of the cost cap penalty that has yet to really affect them, and the departure of key technical personnel such as Dan Fallows. No loss, however, will be more traumatic and soul-crushing than the loss of their star driver, Max Verstappen, and unfortunately for the Milton Keynes team, that point may come sooner rather than later. Max Verstappen's words carry more weight as a Formula 1 world champion and the new man to beat, especially with only two other champions currently active on the grid. Verstappen's responses frequently come with a healthy dose of no-nonsense straight talk, and when he says he won't be racing in F1 into his 40s like Fernando Alonso, Kimi Raikkonen and possibly Lewis Hamilton, that's as sure as it gets. He's also a purist, believing that the sanctity of a traditional Grand Prix weekend should be respected, and isn't a fan of the sprint races despite winning 3 of the 6 held so far. Recent comments from F1 chief Stefano Domenicali were misconstrued as a desire to abolish practice, with the Italian instead open to the idea of revamping those sessions. And with all of this change as F1 tries to stay ahead of the curve, Verstappen is one of those who is skeptical, believing that the series' DNA is at risk with the upcoming format changes for the sprint weekend in Baku. And that could, in the end, push him to retire from the sport sooner than anyone could expect. I don't find that it's the DNA of F1 to do these kind of sprint races, he told the media. F1 is about getting the most out of it in qualifying than having an amazing Sunday. That's the DNA of the sport, and I don't understand why we should change that. When we're going to do all that kind of stuff, the weekend becomes even more intense, and we're already doing so many races. I think that's not the right way to go about it, because we're heading into seasons where you have at one point 24 or 25 races. If you then start adding even more stuff, it's not worth it for me. I'm not enjoying that. Overall, Verstappen's rhetoric has become more concerning of late, with him freely admitting that racing isn't always going to be worth it for him. Racing is my life, but at some point it's no longer worth it to be away from home so much, he said. I want to do other things aside from racing. But what are your thoughts? Is Red Bull in danger of losing their star driver much sooner than expected? Could the looming intra-team conflict spell doom for them? And what about their reliability issues? Will those bite back at some point this season? Please share your thoughts in the comment section down below. Thanks for your time. Please consider liking and subscribing to the channel if you enjoyed the video, and don't forget to click the bell button to be notified of future videos.